being interested in the stuff that I've been actually working on since February 2023, so not long, but long enough that I've made a lot. Some people remarked to me how many come through, but I've lived in Laguna Woods since September of 2022, so not very long, and I joined the club in January of 23. And so I've learned a lot from everyone here, so that's one of the beautiful things about this studio, and I'm really appreciative of having access to it. My background has a lot of music interwoven into it. So I started off playing guitar, I played banjo, I played piano keyboards, ukulele, but I haven't really played that many wind instruments. So when I started working in the studio, I made a few bowls and that, and then I wanted to do something different. So I made a kind of what I could call the deconstructed instrument. So basically it was a sculpture, but I used guitar strings in it and things like that. And then somebody said, well, does it make sound? And I said, well, no. And they said, oh, you should look at ocarinas. And I was like, ocarinas. And I was familiar with the word, but I needed to do more research. So I did look into it. If you do look into it, you see these are some examples of ocarinas. You'll see some that sort of have this shape of a wing. So it's like that very first one, and it's called a transverse ocarina because you play it almost like a flute. Another name for these sometimes is they're called potato flutes because sometimes they end up looking like potatoes. And then there's inline. So I do what you would call inline. Where did ocarinas come from? From Asia and Mesoamerica. And so the ones that you see here that are the transverse, that came out of an Italian maker, or I think maybe in the 1800s or so, started making them. And the word ocarina comes out of a European root. But a lot of these instruments come from like South and Central America, and places like China and Korea all have versions of something, of ceramic flutes and things like that. Obviously bamboo and wood, but also ceramic. So I want to introduce you to somebody. Who's the first person? Let's see. This is Sharon Rowell. And Sharon Rowell was a ceramicist, and she lived in the Bay Area, settled in Stinson Beach, but for a while she was making clay sculptures, clay pottery, and things like that in some kind of artist collective near the Golden Gate Bridge. And so she'd always hear these foghorns, and she heard about ocarinas. So she started making ocarinas, and then she transferred the word, what she made as huacas, H-U-A-C-A, and which is another word. It is a word for a sacred thing. Yes. And so she would make multi-chambered, multi-holes, and it would have a certain kind of low tone to them. And her pieces are very much collected. And she's been the inspiration to a lot of people. She's in the book, one of the books in our library is called From Mud to Music. And she's got a section in here, and actually one of her huacas is actually on the cover of that book. And she in turn inspired somebody who really inspired me. Let's see. Was Hans. Hans Hooks. He lives in the Netherlands. He's a Dutch guy, and he was inspired as well. And so he started making huacas, multi-chambered whistles, and he does multiple variations on it.
Could you just spell his name?
Oh, Hans, H-A-N-S, and the last name is H-O-U-K-E-S. I also have a pad here if you want to put down an email address, and I can email you PDFs of these things that I'm showing you.
Oh, great.
But he makes beautiful things, and he uses a low fire clay, so we don't use low fire clay in the studio. He uses terra sigillata to decorate, and he uses this great technique. You can't quite see it maybe on the screen, but he uses this technique where he puts some terra sigillata in a jar, a little bit extra water and some dish soap, and he puts a straw on it, and he starts blowing bubbles. Maybe other people have done that, so I'm sure maybe that's not just his thing. But he comes out, his pieces are they're works of art. And so this is the guy that I'm shooting for. I don't know if I'll ever get anywhere close, but if I can make pieces that are as nice and sounds as good as his, then I'll be happy. Now, one of the things I really like about Hans is that there's a spiritual element to what he's doing and why he does it this way. Let's see. I was going to show you. So his three, he calls them, he has another one, it's a version called Innato. And it's 3 chambers. Each chamber is not the same size, so large, medium, and small. And he has it positioned almost like a tripod. And what his intention is that you would actually place this on someone's head and play it as a healing instrument. So for sound healing. And to me, that's meaningful to me because I have, my background is actually in Buddhist studies. I've done a lot of meditation. I've done meditation where I've supported meditations that other people were leading, playing, the bowls, the metal bowls. You can get them to sing or you gong them. Yeah. And there was a gentleman who would come to one of our meditation circles, and for the first part of the meditation when I was playing bowls, he would sit outside and then he would come in, and I always thought, like, so what's his deal? Why is he doing that? I guess it's a lesson in my own ego, like I was wondering what I was doing wrong. And he just says there's one or two of the bowls, they just pierced him. He just couldn't tolerate them, like physically, he couldn't tolerate them. And so, so I know sound has an effect. We all know that. We're all vibrating. You can go on and on about that. It's a topic unto itself. But I had an interaction with someone who's a studio member. I don't see her here very often, but I started tuning one of my ocarinas, and she asked me to stop. And I was just like, I was a little frustrated because I was like, I came here to work and I wanted to get this done, But but the other part of me realized that like this probably was really impacting her nervous system, and I believe it. She even, like, I was in the back room doing something with testing one that I had drying, and she made a remark about, like, she didn't realize it was me. She said, "Oh, somebody played that. I almost had to leave." And so that was a bummer in some ways, but I just waited, and eventually she left. But I respected the fact that it had that kind of effect, because it also has a converse effect where it actually feels good to some people, depending on the tone and the notes. So that's what I'm kind of aspiring, and why Hans is an inspiration to me, is because he's very close attention to the tunings and things like that, and he puts a lot of, I think, good intention into what he's doing. So let's transfer over to, I'm going to go over the physical nature of these pieces. In the top diagram, you can see both of these are cross sections, and you'll see it like it's cut in half from the top and the middle. And there's a labium, which is that pointy lip. There's the voicing hole, so the voicing hole, and then you have your airway. Okay, and the size of these and how clean a cut you make in them and that can impact the sound quite a bit. And then of course you have your holes that you put in for the tuning. And let's see what else I can say from that. So you have the mouth of the window. I'll talk about that a little bit more. There are different shapes. You'll see that mine is the square, and I typically stick to that because I can get it to work. I've tried a few times making something more of an oval in that. I haven't had good success. So for the time being, until I can, for now I'm comfortable I can do it this way, but there's no, some say actually that this will get the better tone. But that could be, it depends on the maker, I think. One of the things I wanted to point out in this piece right here is that you see there's some dotted lines. I don't know if you can see it. It's a little faint, I know. But it shows you where the air holes are being impacted. So if you look at this very first one, you can see the airway is very wide. It's wider than the voicing hole. And so what that means is that it disrupts the flow of air as it comes in. The other one, the next one, the one to the right of it, this one, it's narrow. It's a little too narrow. It's much narrower than the voicing hole. And so the idea is that you want to get something that's more in line with the voicing hole itself. And it could have sort of a fan, like a fanned kind of effect. Instead of being a straight lane, as you blow into it, is a little wider where it starts, and I've started adjusting some of my tunings that way. So I have a piece here. So in this, you can see in this particular piece, and you go to look at the hole, it's about the same width. Problem with this one, although glaze-wise, decoration-wise, it's not too bad. Not bad for a real amateur. Did some carving on the side, did a couple different glazes, Bova and I forget what this one. So, but the problem with this one, I think, is the voicing. This is like rubbing your tummy and tapping your head. So the voicing itself, I think it's a little big. And so the reason why I know that, there's a number of things here, is that this one, so what's happened is that to get the whistle to work with even all the holes open, or most of them at the very least, is that there has to be a certain amount of pressure. And if the voicing hole is too big, then it releases the pressure, and all you get is that wispy sound. This is one of my more recent ones that I may start using making the form, and this one's good top to bottom. So this is what I'm shooting for. So this is like one of my, like I said, one of my recent ones that I'm just like, okay, I think I got it. But this one, although it looks good, it's like, it doesn't quite make it. All right, so let's go back to that really quickly. And I probably will move on because I know there's a lot of technical stuff. But the stumbling blocks. You can see the very top one is very flat. So it's not very open, doesn't give much space for the air to sort of move. And it talks about the airway being too wide or too narrow. The one below that, it's got a problem because of that slope. This slope here is really important. The reason why this one wouldn't work well is because the slope is at this angle, and right off the airway. Let me go up and right off the airway. You see this one? It's a drop right below where the airway comes in, and it's going to go through into the voicing hole. You notice right below it, it just drops, and that's important. So like when you make one, you don't want to make it too flat. You don't want to make it like a slope, like right underneath the voicing hole, because it's just not going to work correctly. Because the air is circulating. All right. And this one's got a diagram, which is kind of hard to see as well, but it basically is as if you're looking down the airway underneath the light so you can see through it, and you're trying to see where the tip of that labia, this edge that you created, where that is. And it should be either in the lower half or in the lower third, which might seem kind of counterintuitive, because you would think, well, why don't you blow straight into the, but that's just not how a whistle works. That's just the physics of it. Let's see. This is a good example. This one's in color. You can see on number one, you can see the red is supposed to be that edge, and you see very little on the top. And then the second one, you see it's about halfway. So you want it about halfway, sometimes a little lower. I've been asked, does it matter what angle? Because you make a ramp, right? When you carve it out, and I'll do that in a little bit. When you carve it out, you make a ramp, and they said, does it have to be 45-degree angle? And my answer is no. Because this one has a very shallow ramp. This is one of the ones that just came out too. So no, it has to do with, you want to be matching the angle of the air hole right at that ramp, and I'll show you how I do that in a moment. Okay, so let's get out of that. At this point, does anybody have any questions? No?
Actually, I do.
Okay,
Do you glaze the inside of the instrument?
No,
No, just the outside.
not intentionally. So see, these kind of came out good because I've experimented with a lot of different ways. Like I've dipped them before and then I brushed them, and I don't do a good job brushing. So I dipped these. And so I've done it before where I actually tried to plug all these holes and then dip it, but it didn't work out so great. So what I did is I took one of my wooden sticks like this, and I stuck it in, and I put in a little bit of foam with that. I stuck that in there. And I took another piece of foam. I took one of those little round, sponges that you use to, I cut that in half and I jammed that in there so I didn't, because I don't want to get any glaze in the airway. I don't want to get any glaze in there. I don't want any glaze on the tip of that ramp. So when I dip it in, naturally there's going to be some glaze that goes in there. So I use wax resist, and I'll do each hole. I'll even cover this stuff up too. I'll try to fill this as much with, try to get wax in there pretty good. Because if it's fired and there's glaze in there, forget it. It's done. You don't want anything. You don't even want like a crumb of clay in there. So one of the things they recommend you do is you look through it. You make sure there's no clay, like little bits, like a crumb. At the same time, you don't want it on the exit right there. So yeah, so glaze. There's probably glaze inside this one, but the only thing that affects is the pitch. And so pitch is determined by the size of the vessel, but also the size of the holes. So the voicing hole as well can affect that. Sometimes it's the position, sort of the angle. So it's counterintuitive, but you would think if you want to make it higher, you would make a small hole, right? No, it's the opposite of that. The small hole is going to be lower. So if I make these holes bigger, the pitch of that, when I release that, it's going to be higher. But if you make them narrow, then that brings the pitch down. So when I make them, one of the things I do is I use a tuner, which I'll show you. I'll show myself using it, I try to go a little flat, little lower than what I want it to be as I'm putting stuff in, and then I will let it dry. I'll let the piece dry a little bit more, and I'll go in and I'll do a little bit more fine tuning. Now, if I go over, if all of a sudden I make a hole too big and the pitch is too high, the only way to change that is to add clay. I've done it before where I plugged it with clay, and that's sloppy and doesn't necessarily have great results. I mean, it plugs it, but then you might have this thing sticking out inside the piece. But what I've done is I'll just take slip. I'll take a brush like this, coat it in slip, and I'll just go in and I'll just coat the barrel of where that hole is, and that'll adjust the tuning. And I just leave it like that, let it dry. So there's a way to recover. All right, so I'm gonna, any other questions based on that stuff? Okay.
She did have a hole.
Yeah, so, okay. So my process involves taking, like this is probably close to like maybe 3/4 of a pound, and I will get it into a basic shape, but then I'll also start introducing, usually, sometimes I don't. Sometimes I add the mouthpiece later, but oh, I'm sorry, I should be doing this under here. I'll start making a mouthpiece that I want, and get the rest of the body in shape as well, to some degree. Now some people will make it, and they'll make the perfect shape, and then they'll cut it in half, and then they'll dig it out. They'll just carve their way into it. And for whatever reason, maybe because I just didn't know I didn't want to have all this excess clay to mess with, and I'm not experienced enough to know how to make. We didn't have the recycling bucket and stuff like that. So what I would do, I'm going to take it, and I just cut it in half, right? So I've got a bottom and a top, and then I just start pressing it out. And I create a ridge. Does this show up okay up there?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then I try to get a little bit of that ridge because I'm going to join them together.
By
pull
ridge,
it.
you mean like a side to it?
Yeah. So
It's
the-
like a pinch ball.
Yeah.
it is exactly a pinch
Yeah,
ball.
right?
That's
You
exactly.
started like with that. Okay.
Now the problem with doing it this way is, at least to my skill level, is it ends up being very thick, the shell of it, because there's no way for me to pinch it out and make it like only like a little less than 1/4 inch. But it's okay. But when they got bigger, it got heavy. So this is one of the ones I made early on,
Oh my gosh.
and I think this was 3 pounds of clay. But it's heavy. So in terms of ergonomics, in terms of comfort, it's hard. But these two I made with forms. So I was able to make a very thin outer shell. I'll talk
Now,
about
when you
that.
say forms, what do you mean?
Well, you could do it a couple different ways. One is you could make a plaster mold, right? But I lack patience. Of course, pottery is teaching me, ceramics is teaching me about patience, right? So I made one, and then I made a shell, just like I was just doing it. I pinched it out, put it together, and then I cut it in half. And I scraped out the center a little bit more, and I bisque fired it, and that's what I use for a form. I can either do it on the outside or on the inside. I did this one was done through putting it on the inside. So I made my own forms, and without having to mess with all that plaster. Although I want to learn how to make plaster molds and things like that, but for now that's okay. But a little quick trick, So one of the things I'm aware of is making sure that I'm planning ahead, because I want there to be a drop right here. Right. So this is going to be the air hole. This is going to be the top, and I wanted to make sure that I can have a decent drop off the bottom. So pinch that out. This is going to be very sloppy. I got another one that's sort of in process that I can show you how I put it together, which is you probably all, well, I don't know.
It's good to show everything.
So I start trying to figure out, is it there, close enough? Like this one, I'd say, like for a quick one, pretty close.
Now, could you just review what's the top and the bottom and where the drop is?
This is the top.
Okay.
The drop is going to be right here, right
Okay.
in this part. And so I would put that together. Now, right now, it's very wet. So I like to have it be somewhat dry. Hopefully these dry enough. Notice, not bad. So same thing. So pretend I just did this. It's funny because I always seem to have one side that's got this flat side to it. There's something about it. This one does it too. Okay. So, got your trusty ice cream container full of slip. It's wet enough. I probably don't even need to do all this, but I just do it anyways, even when it's wetter than this. Just because I'm like, well, at least you can't say it's because you didn't score and slip it.
Is the drop on the bottom deeper than the above pinched out?
It's okay that the drop on the bottom is going to be a little bit more on the bottom. One of the things I did when I make it this way is I leave a little bit of extra right here because I'm going to carve it out. That's where the voicing is going to go. And I don't do the voicing until I'm done. There's another gentleman who shows it, and he's like, he has you mark it so that you know exactly where that drop is before you start cutting into it. Let's see. I do only put vinegar in my slip. If anybody's curious. I'm sure that's what everybody else does too. Try to match it up. It's not leather hard. It's got some give to it, which is what I like, because it allows me to sort of manipulate it, try to get these a little bit better. And then, it's probably not extremely necessary, but I do also get a little roll of clay. I'm doing this very fast, so it's not a great one, but it's a good enough one. All right. And then, you know, that seam, I want to seal up. Because sometimes it starts to pull apart when I'm working on it, because you know, you can see from this, you see a lot of thumbprints or whatever you want to do. You know, it's very, it looks like the surface of the moon or something. All cratered. But because of the state where the clay is at, I can fix that. Smooth it out. I've gotten good at that. So I don't know how, you know, I'm sure everyone here has done joins before. Well, maybe not.
I'll
I
never
don't-
tell.
What's that? Am I assuming too much?
Well, the term goes back to the 60s.
Joint.
So yeah, so you know, put that in there. It's even more important when I have the thin walls. Maybe I'll show you. I guess I can get up and walk around a little bit. All right. And I just use one of these, and I kind of try to press that down a little bit. Again, you probably all have better technique than I do, or maybe not. They say that you ask somebody like, how do I do this with clay? And they said, I don't know, I do it this way, but other people do it another way. So I guess the only rules is do what you think can work, or what you know works. Then again, that's why we have to be patient, right? Because even we think we know it will work, and then it doesn't work. So kind of level that down a little bit. I take one of these trusty old ones and I just start working it. And by doing this and having it at a certain, it's not really leather hard. It allows me to still be able to smooth it out. The first ones I made, matter of fact, there's three that are sitting in the window. They probably have that really rough outer surface. They haven't really gotten good at that. I appreciate being in the window, but now I'm like, oh, that makes better ones now. And so basically that's how I finish it. In terms of the outside and get it kind of smoothed out. All right, so pretend that's done. Move on. So I've got some sticks. This is my air hole stick. One of the things that the gentleman who did all the diagrams did is he recommended you get something like this.
I have one of those.
So it measures, right? So it
Vernier
measures
caliper.
the inches. Yeah, caliper, digital. And so I would use this a lot, but now I've gotten to the point where I have a sense of what I'm getting out of it. I keep that around because it does come in handy. So I used it to measure this to make sure this was the certain width. This one, I made sure it was a certain width, and I kind of filed this down so it's a little bit of it's got a beveled edge. And I use these. So when it's still wet, I can still work with the mouthpiece a little bit.
For those sticks originally like a tongue depressor?
Yep, exactly. And then I try to figure out where I want this to go in. So I'll figure it's like I want there, but then I'm looking at it from like this standpoint, and I'm thinking, I want this to go through and come out so that it meets the wall of the so the wall of this piece. And the reason why is because I don't put in I put in the voicing hole and then I carve it. I carve out where that edge is going to be based on where this is going to punch through. So I'll say like, okay, so it's still wet. I'm going to put it in. I figure it's probably got to, and I want to make sure I put it in relatively straight, but I don't put it in very far. So I put it in about that much for this one. Put in a little bit more. About that much. And then I let it dry more. So what this does is when you go to put this through later, if you're trying to do it when it doesn't have that notch in it already, you have a chance to crack it, or it bulges out funny, or something like that. So that one's there. Let's
But
see.
it did go all the way through.
No,
Oh.
no, because the angle that I put it in, and because of the thickness of the wall, it's still sitting just on the edge of it. And that way, like if it, so I think I put it, let's see how far I put it in. That's a good question. Put it in that far. So that is about that. And the drop starts about right here. All right. There's a couple different ones in here, but let me stay on. All right. I don't know if this dried enough. It's all right. So when I set it up to dry, I'll take my handy dandy paddle. You know what a paddle looks like. I don't need to show you that. Flatten that bottom so that it sits. It doesn't roll around, and I hope it doesn't give the people loading and unloading kilns a pain in the butt because they're rolling off and they're afraid they're going to break it. If they roll off and they break, then I'm okay with it. All right. So now I've got this one, right? So this is the next step. It's still a little soft.
One
when-
day after that, one day, the tomorrow, for example,
Uh-huh.
it takes 24 hours to be like that.
Yeah, about that. This is one of those produce bags that's really good at locking in moisture, so this is still kind of damp. I made this on Tuesday. But it's relatively sturdy. I don't think it's what you call like leather hard. So you can still work with it. Sometimes that's helpful. So for example, if I put the stick in and I don't have it lined up quite right, I gotta start over. So basically I take it and I'll squeeze that mouthpiece and I'll seal that up, because if I go in and say, oh no, not right there, I need a higher angle, I can't have that extra little poke in there because it disrupts the flow of the air. So that's what I'm shooting for.
So the width of that stick is determined from one of your charts?
Yes. Yeah. I don't use all his measurements. I think it's one of those things like you do it. That's why you see people who, if you go on YouTube and you find people making ocarinas, you're going to see a lot of different ways that people go about doing it. So I think it just depends. So for this, usually I'm going to put this on a wheel because when it's sitting flat, it's a little bit of an angle, because I wanted that angle to go up towards the wall, right? So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my X-Acto knife. I got some of those sculpting knives. Those are super sharp. They will cut you. I didn't like. I love the control I have because I'm making it very specific. I'm making like a shaft into the piece. And I apologize for the technology. So I'm just gonna kind of guess, and I use this stick, and I'm gonna say, okay, I'm gonna line it up. I'm gonna line it up right over the top of it. and I'm gonna figure out where I'm gonna start it. We're gonna start that hole. So I figure where the drop is, and then I just put a little indent right there, right? So that's
Excuse me, the drop on the inside or what you're eyeing on the outside? You're eyeing it from the inside.
I'm guessing. With this, with a hand build, like with a hand pinch pot style, I'm guessing about that's where it is.
So on the inside is where you,
Yeah. And so I think so, you know, like, that's where I put the piece, the wood. Sorry, I shake in front of people. And so now that I have that, you gotta be careful when that's in there. You can knock into it, all of a sudden you've got an extra wide hole. And then I eyeball it, because it's just through experience. If it was a larger one, I would do a pure square. I would just kind of go corner to corner and then do that. But with this, it's a small one. I'm going to do a little bit less than that. And then I have like a sort of the outline. So you can see the square. And then the X-Acto knife. So I'm just going to use up and down. I like to use this end as where in the corner, and then I can cut towards myself. Probably not a way to use knives, but for this it's all right. And I'm just cutting in and trying to keep it as if I'm making a shaft. Do the top and the bottom, sides. I will say that making really small ones has got to be hard. I have not done pendant style ocarinas. I meant to bring one to show you. It's a great one. Someday I'll do this. I gotta
It has
retire.
an angle in this part, yes?
What's that?
Angle,
Not yet.
no,
Straight down.
just straight.
Yeah.
You ever have that piece fall inside and you couldn't get it out?
This piece,
Yeah.
when it's wet, I struggle. That's why it's a little damp now. It's not my preference. I would let it dry a little bit more, because I like it to come out nice and clean, aside from having to dig for it. But if you dig for it, you can always smooth out the sides. Yeah, it's too wet. And I need glasses. I knew something was missing. Yeah, so that's why I let it dry a little bit more, because it will lift out as one piece. But this is fine. This is why I wanted the overhead view, so you can see this better. This is a really sloppy hole. This is why you don't do it when it's this wet. But so, roughly like that. Just like a shaft of
Just
line.
straight, every.
Yeah, they're mostly straight. like this, I'll take a touch out, I'll probably like straighten it a little bit more. But I had to dig it out a little bit. So now we find out how good of an angle I put on it. So I'm gonna keep pushing, and then eventually it's gonna come through. You can see there's a little bit of a bulb.
You did a good
But
job.
it's right at the base of the shaft.
Yeah, here, I'll
Yeah. I mean,
try to sweep that off. It's gonna come out anyways.
Yes, not thin.
If it's a small piece, you want the hole to be a little smaller. So this is about as big as I would make it for this size. Poking through. I'll push it down until it meets that wall, right? That I was sort of aiming for. And the nice thing about it is I've got clay above it and I've got clay below it. So that means I can figure out about where I wanna. I'm gonna take and make it a little bit of a slice, a little bit of a slice. And then I'll just carve off. I actually need to put that back. Yeah, this is really wet. The nice thing about wet is you can move it around. Something a little different. And actually, one of the things I do is I actually use this.
I don't understand what you're carving out.
It's like a ramp.
Starting to do the ramp.
Mhm.
How about the clay about the stick?
Right even with it.
So when you're pushing that stick through the,
Uh-huh.
you're shooting for, there's the thickness of your wall.
Yeah.
So you're shooting for the middle of the thickness, sort of.
Somewhat. A little low is not too bad because I'll have a little clay below it. But I don't want it to be right at the bottom because it means you know where to go in terms of like manipulating the point, the beveled edge.
Mm.
You can't move it up and down as easily.
Okay.
William, can you put it right in front of the camera?
Oh, so, yeah.
Good. Thanks.
It's shallow like that is because that's where it poked through and I'm like, all right, I can live with that. I can figure it out. But it's not ideal. So by using this, I can smooth out that ramp a little bit as well.
And at this point, it's a whistle, right?
Almost. Here, I'll add labium or the beveled edge have to be sharp. It can be, but it's not necessary. Matter of fact, when I make mine, I never make them sharp. They're a little blunted all the time. But this one, I will take some out because
There's some wakas that go any further than that.
yeah.
I have a little bird one,
Oh, you do? Okay. Yeah.
kind of like a whistle, but
So what I'll do is I'm going to go in and I'm going to stab into it and I'm going to carve out that little bit
Below the ramp.
below the ramp.
What's it called? Some fruit. It's just a little black. But I have one.
from my grandkids gave it to me.
Oh,
I played the flute, so they gave me.
Now, sometimes you drop pieces in, pieces of clay. And it happens too when I'm poking holes in it when I'm tuning. Oh, it's so messy. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to make sure I'm trying to like sheave out any of that extra clay edge underneath. And I do that by slipping this in this way and sort of like pulling away. Now, this is a really sloppy one. All right. Now, because it's so wet, sometimes this air hole is gonna get clogged. There's bits of clay come in there. That, it's just, this is a sloppy.
Could we see it where you, is it ready now?
It's, for this one, it's about as close as it's gonna get.
It's ready as it's gonna get like this. So would you say the airflow is gonna shoot right up that shaft?
Yes,
Theoretically.
theoretically.
Visually.
Theoretically. Whistle is you have pressure of air coming up.
Yeah, but I misspoke. The air is gonna go up that ramp. Theoretically, it's
Not,
lined up.
not exactly.
Not quite?
Not exactly. When you're blowing, yes.
Yeah,
But from inside, there's also stuff circulating.
yeah, no, I know that, but when you blow,
Oh.
How do you
air is
test it?
gonna shoot up that ramp.
Like this?
Not bad, huh?
It's amazing, it sounds so good.
Yeah, they do.
now.
And it's not even like, you hear me like bitching and moaning about, oh, it's so sloppy.
No, it sounds really good.
Okay.
So the air hole, the mouthpiece, the opening, if it's bigger or smaller, we change the pitch, right?
It will. And one of the dangers of having this hole too big, like I wouldn't want to go any bigger, is that
The
like
ones that will be blowing air into the air hole.
like this one, I think this hole is too big.
No, she's
And so-
talking about
But the
the
mouthpiece.
mouth, where you put your mouth.
The slit, the
Where you
slit.
put
The
the mouth.
slit,
What about it?
if
That-
it's
that the
bigger.
slit that you put, is it gonna be bigger or smaller? Will that change the
In this size, like what I will do is I will typically take and put my stick in.
just that width, that thickness?
I'll put it in and maybe not go, I push it through anyways, just so I can get some of these, because it always picks up crumbs.
Uh-huh,
And so I want to pull those crumbs out so the crumbs don't get in the air shaft,
right.
the airway. And then I'll pull it back so that basically it's just at the edge, right?
So would it shrink when you fire, that will
Yeah,
be
well,
smaller too, right?
Yeah, but I've never had them close off.
Oh,
This is actually really pretty thick in terms of this. So if you make small ones, like pendant ones,
Mhm.
you're gonna wanna use like a credit card or a debit card,
That
that
thickness.
thickness,
Okay.
which is even thinner than this. But what I will do is I'll wiggle this back and forth, right? To give it just a little bit of width. And, you know, I was listening to this one guy and he was talking about, I think he actually he goes up and down a little bit with his and creates, so basically you're creating almost like a funnel effect
Yeah.
towards the air hole.
It should be aligned with this edge. The stick should be aligned with the edge.
Yes. For the most part. So now that I have it carved out, let me stick the stick in there again. Because honestly, you'll see, it's pretty close. But it sounded, right?
Yeah.
It sounds great.
Yes.
Sounds great.
Now I could actually drop that ramp a little bit.
Because you want the
That
width
would
of that
affect the
cutout to
tone?
be the same width as the stick too, right?
Yeah,
If you drop that, it would change the sound?
If I,
Drop the
You said
ramp.
if you drop
it'll change the tone. So one of the things I'm always trying to get rid of is there's this wispiness to it sometimes. And
Because that's like some other crumb, the clay.
I think it's all these things. There's all these little details along the way. There's the size of the voicing, you know, whether or not you created a decent air hole.
Does the length of that ramp, will that change, your,
No. No, but I wouldn't go too far. I wouldn't make a really long one
No.
because it just kind of gets
You
in
know,
a piece.
I played the flute, so when you play the flute, you have to learn how to get this hole correctly, otherwise you have that wispy sound you're talking about.
Yeah,
You gotta-
exactly. And it's tough. I mean, that's something I could hear, and I was getting a lot that were like they sound good, and people are very kind and sharing. They're saying, oh, that sounds good, and I know it sounded good, but for me, I'm sitting there going, I hear this wispiness. Like my ear, I can hear it. It's sort of like whenever I hear somebody like say a podcast or somebody recorded who's talking. I can tell the difference between them sitting in a room like this and sitting in a sound studio. You can hear the room. You're like, I hear the reverb. So my ear is like, I'm not perfect pitch, but that's what I'm like. This one just doesn't have it. I'm really proud of this one. I'm like,
Sounds
this
so
one,
good.
thank you. This one's good, but I still hear a little bit of wisp. So, but for your average user, I think it's fine. There's certain ones that I won't sell. Like I won't even sell as decorative unless, well, maybe I would. If somebody wants to.
How many have you made altogether, I think?
Oh, put number there.
Oh, you've never?
Yeah, this one was 83. This one's 82. So let's see, and I have about 96. I've made 96.
Wow.
Now, not all of them made it all the way through, because what I do is I actually have a notebook and I keep track of like where the note was. I try to measure things when it's wet, so the size of the voicing, and I note what the notes are, and I'll use that also where I write it out so that I know what the scale that I want to use. Now, so what I use to tune is a tuner like this, and you can get something like this as an app on your phone. Or you can get one that's mechanical and has the actual. And so what I'm shooting for is I'm trying to get that first note as close as I can to the very top, right at the apex, right? Little
And
low.
when you blow into it, that app will show you, or that little machine will show you if you're on.
Yeah. I wanted to be able to show you like me doing it, so it's kind of a bummer. This one was an F, and it was hovering just between the very top and in that area right to this side of it. So it's a little sharp, but I would leave it there. I would, yeah. Is it F sharp? F sharp. It's pretty close.
Wow.
So pretty close.
That's pretty cool.
But I don't try to, the only thing is if I wanted to be dead on, I'd have to bring it up. I can't put more clay in to bring that down. Not a whole thing like that. So for me to push it, I won't do it. I'll just say, okay, that's its imperfection. That's me. That's it telling me what it's going to be. Like I had no idea this was going to be an F sharp.
So when you fire it, it will go up, right?
It will. It'll go from an F sharp to a G sharp.
Oh, because you know tempers are roughly 10%. Not that I know it.
I've done the holes a bunch of different ways. I have one of these tools, which is okay, but I think what I found out is when you're drilling down, or at least how I was doing it, I'd end up with these little, what do you call them?
Crumbs. Or
Crumbs.
Dust. Or
Yeah, just like around the edge, inside it. I cut one open and I was like, oh, that's a mess.
Yeah.
Like my Merle, if you know Merle, her grandfather was a dentist. So she had all these old dentist tools. So that's actually one of the tools I've used. Is I've got an old dentist tool. And it's got a little bit of a hook to it, and I'll stick it in the holes and I'll kind of scoop around to make sure that that's gone, because I was trying to figure out what's causing the wispiness, the airiness, what's causing that. And I realized it's a number of different things, and that's one thing, but it's not all of it.
Or do you want to take care of that before you put the holes in? The other holes?
Try to get it to be pretty good. I mean, it's wet, it's damp, so I can manipulate it a little bit more later.
I'm watching that clock, I gotta leave it
Okay.
a while, but.
I'm gonna finish up in a
How
moment.
you-
I'm gonna finish
how
up.
you
I'll get
put the holes
just.
in.
So
You're
I've
not
got
doing
I've
that
got 3 sizes of these,
Oh, a whole bunch of.
and I don't remember what the sizes are, but I think there are only 3 sizes they make.
Yeah, I do too.
And the miracle of it is that this particular one, which is the middle one, for this size, is almost perfect. I just plug the holes in and they're almost there. I just do a little tuning. And when I'm tuning, I'm just taking this tool and I go inside the hole and I just take a little off the edges, and I just kind of scrape it out just a bit. Try not to overdo it. But that's how I bring the pitch up.
But how do you know where to put it? What distance from the,
It's about how I think somebody's gonna hold it.
oh,
Now you don't want your holes too close to the voicing,
no.
so I'll try to keep them out here, but I'll take and say okay, there's the first
I
one.
think there'd be a science to that distance.
I guess it doesn't matter.
Poke it in,
It doesn't seem like matter, the position, the whole.
twist, because if I twist, it means it'll come
It's a distance
right
from
out.
around
There it is. So that's the first, that's the root note, F sharp. And that next note is the first, that's that next note in a pentatonic minor. just doing that, there's like magic that goes on.
So there's no scientific method to where those have to be placed?
There probably is.
Yeah.
But I just use my intuition to some degree, and I try to have certain principles, like I don't put them too near the voice hole, and I try to think like, you know, because this is a game even shrink, so like I'm measuring it on my own hand, you know.
Further away than the word is.
So
Do you
it
put
could
one
be,
at the bottom too?
what's that?
Do you put one at the bottom?
For this one, I did,
Oh, okay.
because I needed one more hole, and I realize I have to be very much more conventional, and I've gotten to the point where like this is my uniform way of putting holes in. I've done it just haphazardly putting holes in and thinking like we're, you know, I don't like the idea of like you having to lift 4 fingers off this size. So for this particular tune, I mean, it is my goal to do something that is 12, you know, has the 12, has the whole scale, has the whole, I mean, the whole 12 notes.
Does it matter where you put the hole at the bottom? Do they
No.
line up?
I just figured out, tried to figure where somebody's thumb is going to be. That was about it. So
But they
nothing.
don't line up with the other hole otherwise.
No, I mean I could look through the holes and probably find that hole, but it doesn't matter their relationship to each other that way. It just has to do with like somebody be able to hold it and play it. So that's kind of how I figured it out, or how I determined, you know, where the other ones are. I mean, for this, you know, it's just like I would just do the same thing, because like I said, through some magic, this one just I don't even have to do much. Like I said, I'll let this dry after I put holes in it, and I'll do a little more tuning before it's probably when it's more leather hard, and then I just leave it. Now, if I bisque fire it and I want to change it, the only thing I can do is make a note higher. I've got a Dremel tool, and I'll actually go in and carve out a little bit more if I feel like it's needed. I try not to go crazy about it. Usually, some of them are just close. Like I said, these are. And I'm going to end there because I could actually take it up two whole hours, 3 hours